day promises a new dawn in what is already a strong friendship, but which can be so much stronger in the months and years and decades ahead. Strong for the benefit of our countries, but strong for the benefit of the wider world. I am acutely conscious of what Australia has to offer India. I'm also acutely conscious of India's vast potential as the world's emerging democratic superpower.
You're watching The World from Below, and that was footage of Prime Minister Tony Abbott in a joint press conference with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Abbott's trip to India this month coincided with the signing of a nuclear safeguards agreement by both countries. The agreement ends a long-standing ban on uranium exports to the subcontinent. The agreement stipulates that India must only use the uranium for peaceful purposes that adhere to recognised international safety standards. Dave, can you tell us who we currently sell uranium to and for what purpose?
Well, we sell uranium to a range of countries in the European Union, to the USA, to Japan, South Korea. We've entered into agreements with India and the United Arab Emirates, and we also have had one sale and now a suspension of further sales to Russia. We'd probably sell, it would be a third of our material, a third of our uranium goes to Europe, a third to the US and a third to Japan and South Korea.
Can you tell us, when we talk about the risks of nuclear power, Dr. Williams, we often think about what happened at Fukushima, but can you tell us about some of the more everyday risks posed by nuclear power generation?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of controversy about that, in terms of the health risks associated with the functioning of nuclear reactors. Probably the most useful study that's been done on that subject was this large study that the German government sponsored about 10 years ago to try and establish the health risks, particularly for young children. And this study, which is often called the KIK study, K-I-K-K, showed that children under the age of 5 had something like double the rates of leukemia, up to about 5 kilometres from all of the nuclear reactors in Germany. And the evidence for elevated rates of cancers, particularly leukemias in small children, actually extended out to about 50 kilometres from nuclear reactors. Now, there are all sorts of discussions about what the real meaning of that study is, but it's quite clear that people who live in the vicinity of nuclear reactors and presumably other radiological facilities like that are at increased risk. I guess those studies have been replicated in other countries as well. So there's no question that because of the low level release of radioactive materials from nuclear reactors, even in their normal functioning, they do pose a risk to human populations.
Dave, when we're told that we only export uranium for peaceful purposes, can we rely on that presumption?
No, we can't. Unfortunately, we can't. Uranium is a dual-use fuel, so it can power a reactor. It can equally power a nuclear weapon. We sell to countries that are nuclear weapon states, to the US, to France, to China, to Russia, to the UK. Now we're shaping up for India. All of these countries have nuclear weapons. All of them have blurred lines between their civil and military nuclear industry. In the case of India, that line is extremely blurred. So what we have is the illusion of protection. Nuclear weapon states can pick and choose which nuclear facilities they allow international inspections of. They can say that these facilities are off limits today, tomorrow or forever. And there is really no guarantee, no assurance. It's a paper promise and an illusion of protection.
So, Dr. Williams, we know about obviously how nuclear bombs can cause immense human devastation, but can you tell us also about some of the other forms of nuclear weapons that have serious health consequences?
Yeah, well, essentially there's two types of weapons that use uranium-type fuels. One is the classic nuclear weapon, like the one that was dropped on Hiroshima and similarly on Nagasaki. But there are another variety of weapons, which is sometimes called depleted uranium weapons or DU munitions. These are weapons which are constructed from the waste stream, essentially, of the uranium industry, particularly using a very long-lived uranium isotope, uranium-238, which has got a half-life of several billion years. So it hangs around in the environment for a very long time. So one of the features of depleted uranium, U-238, is that it's incredibly tough. It's tougher than tungsten. So about 30 years ago, military scientists realised that that would make a very effective tip for a variety of munitions. So they're now used frequently in bullets and small-sized missiles.
But which kind of armies are we talking about here using?
So, well, I think most of the major armies in the world have used them, deployed them. The United States has certainly used a lot of uranium munitions. We know that a huge amount of U-238 was dispersed across the environment in Iraq and also in Kosovo. And the problem with this is that although it's not a sort of super high radioactive toxin, it's a heavy metal and it's an alpha emitter, which means that if it's ingested or inhaled, it has the potential, once again, as I described earlier, to damage human DNA and therefore potentially precipitate cancers and other types of illness.
So I just want to get this straight. If we're told that we could be exporting uranium for the purposes of power generation, it's possible that those products that arise out of that process could then be used in depleted uranium weapons. Is that right?
It's definitely possible. As my understanding is that the depleted uranium munitions have, generally speaking, been constructed from the military waste stream. But if you look at the military waste stream from the beginning of nuclear weapons in the early days, nobody really worried about trying to pretend that there was a division between the civil and the military. So Australia sold uranium, a long time into the American and the British military. And it's more than likely that uranium that was dug up in Australia has ended up in depleted uranium munitions. But you could never prove that because you can't brand it or tag it or something like that. But logically, it makes sense that what started as a rock in Australia has ended up as a contaminant in environments in other countries by that means.
We've also seen just recently with Prime Minister Abbott's visit to India, the former head of the Indian National Security Board said that this welcomed the sale of Australian uranium and said that this will free up domestic Indian uranium for use in their weapons program. So, directly or indirectly, Australian uranium sales fuel insecurity and fuel risk and tension. Australian uranium was inside the Fukushima reactor when it melted down. Australian uranium will facilitate the diversion of Indian domestic uranium to India's nuclear weapons system, and we can't ensure or have a strong, clear guarantee that that's not happening to every place we sell this material to.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back to talk more about how we dispose of nuclear waste after the break.